Thank you. First of all, Secretary Pompeo, thank you for your service, being our diplomat around the world. You mentioned the returning Americans home efforts that you have made in meeting with families last week, and one of those families was the parents of Otto Warmbier. And I thank you for staying in touch with them. They appreciated it. I'll be in Korea next week, talking, among others, to our ambassador, Admiral Harris, and South Korean officials about what's going on in North Korea and continuing to hold up their human rights abuses and expose for everyone what happened to Otto and what's happening to others, including North Koreans. So thank you for staying on top of that issue. And of course, tighter sanctions is something we should all want as we begin to see some progress as a result of the sanctions we have put in place. I want to talk about the Global Engagement Center quickly and about Ukraine. On the Global Engagement Center, you recall Senator Murphy and I a few years ago started working on encouraging state to not just establish the center, but to properly fund it. I want to thank you because this year you have made a request in your budget of $76.5 million, which is a 38% increase from last year's request. I know you've got a tight budget, and I know you're being asked to find cuts elsewhere. And this is encouraging to me because I think it's undeniable that the propaganda and disinformation that's going on around the world, including from state actors, and we're going to learn a lot more, I think, about Russia even the next few weeks here in terms of what they're doing. In this session, we can't talk about some of the details, but the reality is it's such a huge threat, and I think your former role at the Central Intelligence Agency probably informs you better than other secretaries of state. So I assume that having recognized that, this budget increases reflecting your concern. Having said that, one thing we haven't gotten done yet is this DOD transfer. We've authorized a $60 million transfer from DOD for this fiscal year 2019. It's authorized by law. Can you confirm that you all have requested that full $60 million from DOD?
Senator, we have requested that.
Thank you. Do you see this process going a little more smoothly this year? Last fiscal year, recall, we got it at the 11th hour, maybe the 11th and a half hour, if that's possible. Any sense of where we are this year?
Senator, we're working on it. It did take us a long time last year. I hope that it goes more quickly this year. We've now done it once, so I think there's a mechanism in place. I'm hopeful it'll move along more quickly.
Interagency cooperation is one reason we put this in place, where you've got to go to the State Department or the Defense Department. They've got to work with you. Do you feel as though the interagency process is working well? We want DOD's help in this effort.
You mean with respect to the GEC?
With respect to GEC.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we've made strides. Look, it took us a little while. We didn't have someone there that we'd chosen to lead that organization. We now have that person in place, and I think it's improved dramatically, really, over what's now the last 2 months.
With regard to Ukraine, quickly, and thank you for the GEC help. We have finally, as you know, provided help to the Ukrainians to be able to defend themselves. And that was a change in this administration. We appreciate that. Lethal and non-lethal security assistance so they can defend their own sovereign territory. In the National Defense Authorization Bill 2 years ago, we authorized naval assistance for the first time. And particularly what's gone on since then on the Kerch Strait means that we need to do all we can to help deal with the naval side of this, that the Russians are being increasingly aggressive. Do you know what the status is of transferring these 2 XS Island-class cutters to the Ukrainian Navy, and are you encouraging of that?
I am encouraging it. I do not know the status, Senator.
Okay. I appreciate you guys getting back to me on that. It seems to me that that's one of our pressing capability gaps we have. Can you speak to other concerns you might have about what's going on in Ukraine, particularly vis-a-vis Russia?
So we are now years into this, and it is frozen at best. Still challenges, still fighting along the line of control nearly every day. You know, I think everyone's staring at the Ukrainian election now, a handful more days before the Ukrainians will select their next leader. And we will engage closely with whoever that leader is to ensure that we continue to provide support for Ukrainian democracy.
Well, I appreciate that. I do think we're at a critical time right now. We'll see what happens in the election. I plan to go over after the election, meet with the new government, but it is a frozen conflict. I've been on the contact line. On the other hand, I think we have begun to change the dynamic by the support you provided. We've got to continue to do it. I have one other question. Maybe you can send something in response as a written response, but it has to do with the sanctions regime. I'm hearing from some folks that state that they're having a tough time sanctioning certain Russian individuals because the Treasury Department indicates that our legislation here is too restrictive. In other words, that legislation as it relates to specific things like Ukraine and what happened in Crimea might not relate exactly to a particular individual who is otherwise involved in malign efforts that affect the national security interests of the United States. Would it be helpful to you to have a broader sanctions regime that this body could send you in order to ensure that the individuals that you would like to sanction are able to be sanctioned?
I think it's definitely worth taking a look at. Some of this is on the Treasury side, not on, so the relief would need to be for the broader scope would need to be for Treasury sanctions. But I'd love to see that, and we should evaluate and make sure we do it in a thoughtful way so that we actually pick up what we're looking for.
Okay, if you could provide us some further information on that, that'd be
Happy to
helpful
do that,
as to
yes,
what
sir.
you're looking for. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.